Episode 61, Sect Leader. That one is the god of wealth. 1. Where did I learn? Cough. Well, that was a gusher. Blood spilled from Lee Song-baek's mouth like the aftermath of a bad night out, and Chung Myung sighed as he released the poor guy's collar. I might have gone a little overboard, he thought, like someone realizing they added way too much hot sauce to their ramen. Even though Lee Song-baek's technique was unacceptable, Chung Myung couldn't treat him like a punching bag forever. The kid definitely didn't invent this flashy move on his own. Ch-ch. With the grace of a disgruntled babysitter, he reached out and slapped Lee Song-baek's neck. Tack! His chi flowed into the poor guy, calming his trembling body like a sedative after an all-nighter. Lee Song-baek's expression relaxed, probably for the first time since he ran into this particular nightmare. With Lee Song-baek no longer looking like he was auditioning for a horror movie, Chung Myung stood up and glanced at the sky, probably wondering if his past life karma was catching up to him. Chung Myung, staring dramatically at the sky like he was waiting for divine intervention, finally asked, "Is that the Southern Edge sect's new technique?" "Yes," came the shaky response from Lee Song-baek, who was still trying to keep his internal organs where they belonged. 12-movement snowflower sword technique? Yes. Chung Myung couldn't help but chuckle bitterly, like someone realizing their ex had moved on with their best friend. They even renamed it? This was next-level trolling. If Mount Hua found out, heads would roll, and not in a fun way. But then again, most of Mount Hua wouldn't even recognize their own technique anymore. It was like if someone copied your homework, changed a couple words, and then acted like a genius in front of the teacher. "Who all learns this sword art?" Chung Myung asked, eyes narrowing. Lee Song-baek hesitated. The second-class disciples? And the first-class disciples? Chung Myung pressed. And the elders? The elders didn't learn it, Lee Song-baek stammered. Just the first and second-class disciples. Chung Myung's eyes gleamed. Oh, this was getting better and better. If none of the elders learned it, that meant the criminal mastermind behind this bastardized technique was still alive. He smiled the kind of smile that makes you check if you accidentally texted your boss the wrong meme. Perfect. Time for some payback. These Southern Edge folks weren't just borrowing a cup of sugar. They straight up raided the whole pantry when Mount Hua was on fire. Pretended to help us while they took our most precious martial arts? The audacity! Chung Myung's jaw tightened with enough force to make a chiropractor rich for life. These Southern Edge bastards. These assholes, he muttered under his breath. If there was a rage meter, Chung Myung's was about to explode. He wasn't some punk off the street. He risked his life for these sects. And how do they repay him? By slapping Mount Hua in the face with some rebranded sword move? The nerve. People make mistakes, sure, but this was like robbing your house, blaming you for not having a better lock, and then hosting a housewarming party in your living room. They named it Snowflower Sword? What a load of crap, Chung Myung grunted, turning his death glare on Lee Song-baek. You, he snapped. Yes, Lee Song-baek responded, trying his best to keep his lunch down. Don't learn this. Huh? Why? Because I said so. That's why, you idiot, Chung Myung barked, giving him a solid smack on the back of the head like a pissed-off uncle at a family reunion. Lee Song-baek whimpered, clutching his head. Ch-ch. Chung Myung, feeling mildly guilty, but still very much annoyed, softened his tone slightly. This path is no good, kid. Lee Song-baek stared at him with wide eyes, looking like a student being told that majoring in philosophy might not lead to a lucrative career. And of course, the elders had been hyping up the Snowflower Sword. Sure, they did. Chung Myung knew the truth. None of those elders had actually mastered the damn thing. It was like they were selling tickets to a magic show, but they hadn't figured out any of the tricks yet. Flashy techniques could impress the crowd, but when push came to shove, substance won the day. The Southern Edge sect. They've got it all wrong, Chung Myung sighed, rubbing his temple. He realized now that this whole mess might be his fault. Yeah, when he was alive, he kicked the Southern Edge sect's butt so hard they couldn't even sit down comfortably. And now they had inferiority complexes about their sword techniques. Oh, come on. If I had been born there, I'd be their top dog, Chung Myung thought. Honestly, it wasn't about the sword arts. It was about who wielded them. That's why he was a legend, and they were, well, trying really hard. Meanwhile, Li Songbek, still rubbing his head, looked at Chung Myung like he was some kind of wandering sage. I shouldn't learn the snowflower sword? Nope, Chung Myung said, popping the P for emphasis. But, kid, life isn't about what others tell you. It's about figuring things out for yourself. That's the difference between being a puppet and being the master of your fate. Chung Myung turned and started to walk away like he'd just dropped the mic at a self-help seminar. Wait, Lee Song-baek called out, bowing deeply. Thank you for your guidance. Chung Myung waved a hand dismissively without looking back, as if to say, no problem, kid. I do this all the time. But inside, his blood was boiling again. These bastards, he muttered to himself, stealing Mount Hua's technique and pretending it's theirs? If I were as strong as I used to be, what would you even do, aside from complaining? His Sayung's voice echoed in his head, sarcastic as ever. It felt like he was laughing at him from beyond the grave. If I had my old strength, the Southern Edge sect would already be 6 feet under, Chung Myung grumbled. But alas, he was just a third-class disciple now, and the road to reclaiming his former glory was long. Still, one thing was clear. The Southern Edge sect had crossed a line. They were like that annoying neighbor who borrowed your lawnmower and then tried to sell it back to you at a garage sale. Oh, they're going to regret this, Chung Myung muttered, glancing south toward the Southern Edge sect. He didn't know when, but payback was coming. And when it did, it wasn't going to be pretty. I need to get stronger, faster, Chung Myung muttered, his frustration mounting like a bad hangover after one too many bottles of plum wine. This wasn't just about him, though. It wasn't like Chung Myung planned to single-handedly drag Mount Hua out of the gutter. Okay, maybe he did, but let's pretend he wasn't that arrogant. If Mount Hua was going to rise again, the entire sect needed to level up. This wasn't just his personal grudge against Southern Edge. This was about reclaiming Mount Hua's dignity. Because, let's face it, these guys had been the doormat of the martial arts world for too long. Not anymore. But of course, Mount Hua was currently weaker than a kitten trying to fight a tiger. Right now, accusing the Southern Edge sect of theft would just be embarrassing. It'd be like an ant calling out a boot for stomping it, pointless and, frankly, pathetic. Only for now, he growled through clenched teeth, every word laced with determination. But the time will come. He wasn't sure when, but one day, Mount Hua would get its act together. And when that day came, Chung Myung was going to make sure the Southern Edge sect paid the price for their arrogance. He'd rub their noses in it like a puppy caught chewing on the furniture. And no, there wouldn't be any gentle scolding involved. But it wasn't just about revenge. Chung Myung wasn't just some maniac hell-bent on making the Southern Edge sect cry. Although, let's be real, that would be a bonus. He wanted to rebuild Mount Hua into a powerhouse, strong enough that no one could mess with them again. They were going to be untouchable, a force to be reckoned with, like a really buff bodyguard who also happens to be a genius strategist. 12-movement snowflower sword technique, he muttered, almost spitting the name out like it tasted bad. It was impressive, sure, but not in the way that made him admire their skill. No, it was like admiring the creativity of a really well-made counterfeit. You didn't respect it. You just had to admit that the effort was there. The technique was clearly modeled after Mount Hua's 24 Plum Blossom sword, but it wasn't a lazy copy. They'd actually put thought into it, blending it with their own sword arts and adjusting the speed to fit their style. He sighed, a hint of begrudging admiration in his breath. Which is why it's so damn annoying. They hadn't just swiped Mount Hua's technique. They'd polished it up and made it their own, like someone stealing your recipe, adding a few spices, and then winning a cooking contest with it. A sly grin crept onto Chung Myung's face. I'll let them have their fun for now, he muttered, the mischievous glint in his eyes returning. But I'll burn them soon enough. Oh, he wasn't the kind of guy to sit around and wait for karma to do its thing. No, Chung Myung was more of the hands-on type when it came to revenge. If the Southern Edge sect was going to go down, he was going to be the one to bring them to their knees. No question about it. You crossed the wrong guy, he whispered, his voice barely audible over the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. Looking south toward the distant mountains, where the Southern Edge sect sat smugly on their stolen throne, Chung Myung clicked his tongue in disgust. I'll make sure you pay for touching Mount Hua, he vowed. With that, he turned on his heel and began walking back toward the guild, feeling the weight of his resolve settle deep in his chest. What Chung Myung didn't know was that the opportunity to crush the Southern Edge sect under his heel, the revenge he thought was a long way off, was much closer than he could have ever imagined. Episode 62, Sect Leader. That one is the god of wealth. Ah, Mount Hua. Normally the bastion of discipline, focus, and, well, peace is currently in complete chaos. The entire sect was in disarray, and not because someone got into the liquor stash, but because a certain pain-in-the-ass disciple had been missing for 7 days. 7 days! Now, I know what you're thinking. That's it? Just one guy goes MIA, and everyone loses their minds? Well, in Mount Hua, it wasn't like the good old days where disciples would sneak out at night to chase some extracurricular activities down in the village. Things were supposed to be different now. Yoon Jong was pacing, probably carving a path into the floorboards with how nervous he looked. Do you think he got into an accident? Jo Gul asked, looking worried. An accident? Yoon Jong's eyebrow twitched. Gul, this is Chung Myung we're talking about. I have a better chance of accidentally growing wings than that punk running into any real trouble. Yeah, you're right, Jo Gul muttered, imagining Chung Myung with his usual sadistic grin. That face was made for trouble. If that guy ran off, it's probably because he felt like it. The real question is, why now? Jo Gul crossed his arms, squinting like he was in some cheesy detective drama. Maybe he just got bored of annoying us and found a whole new mountain of victims. Yoon Jong sighed. At least the elders are dealing with it. Cut to the meeting of Mount Hua's top brass, aka the "oh shit, we gave Chung Myung Freedom Committee." Hyun Young, the finance guy, you know, the one who makes sure people don't blow the sect's budget on fancy swords, was fuming. We let a third-class disciple wander off for 7 days, without so much as a word, and we're just supposed to wait. The sect's reputation is at stake. What if people think we let him run off because we're too soft? Hyun Sang, who heads martial arts, piped up, probably too zen for this entire discussion. Or, what if he's hurt? Lost his footing, maybe? Hyun Young snorted. Lost his footing. That little shit? If he did, he'd probably pull a somersault midair, land on his feet, and laugh at the rocks for even daring to trip him. But they couldn't just brush it off. Hun Jong, the sect leader, sighed heavily, probably reconsidering his life choices for the 100th time this week. Letting that kid off the leash, maybe not the best idea after all. Fine, we'll organize a search party. Just in case. He didn't sound too convinced, though. If anyone could survive being thrown off a cliff, it was Chung Myung. Hell, the rocks would probably beg for mercy before he hit the ground. After more bickering about proper punishment and the necessity of discipline, everyone's favorite shit stirrer suddenly reappeared, right in the middle of their high-stakes meeting. Sect leader! A disciple yelled from outside. Chung Myung's back! Hyun Jong leapt up from his chair. Is he hurt? Nope, he looks fine. Just, not remorseful. The sect leader's face fell, and for good reason. Of course, the little bastard isn't sorry. When they stepped out, there was Chung Myung, sauntering back into Mount Hua like a boss who just closed a huge deal, not a hint of shame on his smug face. Hyun Young couldn't take it anymore. You brat! Where have you been? Chung Myung, always one to play it cool, tilted his head. Huh? I went out for a bit. What's the big deal? Oh, I dunno. The big deal is that you've been gone for a damn week, and we were about to send search parties into the mountains. Do you have any idea how worried we were? No? Didn't think so. Just as Hyun Young was about to lose it, another voice interrupted the scene. Don't be so harsh on him, a calm but familiar voice said from behind. Everyone turned to see none other than Elder Huang, looking healthier than ever, and very much not on his deathbed, as they were led to believe 7 days ago. Elder Huang? Hyun Jong blinked, confused. Weren't you supposed to be? Dying? Oh yeah, that was before this fine young disciple here saved my life. Cue dramatic gasp from the crowd. Wait, what? Chung Myung saved you? Hyun Jong asked, completely taken aback. 7 days ago, we got a letter saying you were about to kick the bucket. Elder Wang smiled warmly. That's right, and thanks to this disciple, I'm in better shape than ever. Chung Myung just stood there, hands behind his head, grinning like the Cheshire Cat. Yeah. No need to thank me all at once. Hyun-young's eye twitched as he tried to process it all. So, let me get this straight. You left the sect for 7 days, didn't tell anyone, and while we were all losing our minds, you were off, saving lives? Chung-myung shrugged. Pretty much. This kid's either a hero or a complete pain in the ass, the elders thought in unison. Probably both. Just when you thought things were settling down, Chung-myung casually added, "Oh, and Elder Huang's Unha Guild? They're planning on donating a fortune to Mount Hua." Boom. Now the elders weren't just mad, they were also incredibly confused and begrudgingly impressed. Hyun-jung massaged his temples. All right, let's get back inside before I lose my mind entirely. And with that, Mount Hua's leadership team, heads spinning, walked back inside to figure out how to handle their favorite chaotic disciple. And that, my friends, is how Chung-myung, in true bad boy fashion, not only got away with leaving the sect for a week, but also managed to save someone's life, secure a massive donation, and somehow piss off all the elders at the same time. This kid was really something else. As the group made their way inside, Hyun-young, still looking as though he was ready to burst a vein, grumbled, "I don't care how much money he brings in, this brat still needs to learn discipline. We can't have him just running off like this, even if he comes back with sacks of gold." Eun-jeom, who had been suspiciously quiet up until now, nodded with a stern expression. "Sect leader, if you let him off easy, the rest of the disciples will think it's okay to wander off and play hero too. He needs a serious punishment." Hyun-jong sighed, fully aware that he wasn't going to get out of this one without some kind of disciplinary action. Half a month of confinement should be enough. He's young, and we shouldn't be too harsh on him. Eun-geom, however, was having none of that. Half a month? Sect leader, this is Mount Hua, not some training camp for delinquents. He left the sect for 7 days without permission. We should imprison him for 6 months. The room fell silent for a moment. Even Chung-myung, who had up until now been grinning like the cat who ate the canary, paused for a second. 6 months? He muttered under his breath. What am I, a criminal? Actually, yes, Hyun-young snapped, probably resisting the urge to lunge across the room and throttle him. Running off without permission is no small matter. If the second-class disciples pulled this stunt, they'd be locked up for a year. Wow, a whole year, Chung-myung said, scratching his head. What, you guys trying to win Harshest Elders of the Year award or something? Hyun-jong, who had been standing silently, arms folded, finally spoke. Enough. His voice was calm but firm, commanding the attention of the room. The decision will be made after we have all the facts. The facts? Hyun-young couldn't believe what he was hearing. The fact is, this kid has been gone for a week. What more do we need to know? Sect leader, Eun-geom added. We're not asking for his head, just that he learns the importance of discipline. Hyun-jong nodded slowly, though his eyes softened as he looked at Chung-myung. He understood the frustration of his fellow elders, but he couldn't help but feel conflicted. You're right, he said at last. He will be punished. But let us hear his explanation first. It's only fair. Hyun-young threw up his hands, clearly at his wit's end. Fine, but if this explanation doesn't knock my socks off, I'm voting for 6 months of confinement. All eyes turned to Chung-myung, who had been listening to the whole exchange with a bemused expression. You want an explanation? He asked, crossing his arms. All right, but I don't know if you're ready for it. Hyun-young narrowed his eyes. Try us. Well, Chung-myung began, his voice casual. I went down to the village to visit Elder Wang and make sure he didn't die. You know, because saving lives is kind of my thing. Hyun-young opened his mouth to retort, but Chung-myung raised a hand to stop him. But that's not all, he said, leaning in a little as if he were about to reveal the secret to eternal youth. Turns out, Elder Wang's been sitting on a ton of cash, and after I saved his life, he felt so grateful that he's donating a big chunk of it to Mount Hua. The elders blinked. The gears in their heads turned slowly as they processed what he'd just said. What? Hyun-jong finally managed to ask. That's right, Chung-myung said with a grin. The Unha Guild is making a massive donation, enough to buy all the swords, scrolls, and robes we could ever want. Plus, maybe even some new shoes for the finance department. He shot a cheeky glance at Hyun-young, whose face was frozen in a mix of disbelief and outrage. And that's supposed to make everything better? Hyun-young barked, although it was clear the thought of a mountain of gold was seriously undermining his rage. Well, I figured it might take the edge off, Chung-myung said with a smirk. I mean, the sect's finances have been looking a little rough, haven't they? No need to thank me all at once. Elder Huang, who had been standing quietly beside him, cleared his throat and nodded solemnly. It's true. If it weren't for this young disciple, I wouldn't be standing here today, and Mount Hua has earned the gratitude of the Yunha Guild. We'll be supporting your sect moving forward. The room went dead silent. It wasn't every day that someone swoops in, breaks all the rules, and then saves the day by securing enough money to keep the sect running for years. It was unexpected. Hyun-jong's brow furrowed as he stared at Chung-myung. He should have been furious. This kid had disobeyed orders, disappeared for a week, and caused no end of headaches. And yet, here he was, standing like a hero who had just pulled off a miraculous save. The sect leader rubbed his temples. Fine. You've brought great fortune to Mount Hua, again, but you still broke the rules. Chung-myung shrugged. Guilty as charged. Half a month of confinement, Hyun-jong declared. No arguments. Chung-myung grinned. Half a month? I can handle that. Hyun-young looked like he was about to burst, but even he had to admit that the brat had outmaneuvered them all. You got lucky, kid, he muttered, shaking his head. But next time? Yeah, Chung-myung said, waving him off. Next time, I'll make sure to save even more lives. And with that, the meeting was adjourned, leaving the elders to grapple with the fact that their most troublesome disciple had once again managed to pull off the impossible, annoying everyone in the process, of course. Episode 63, Sect Leader. That one is the god of wealth. So, Hyun-jong couldn't hide his shock. The rest of the room was just as stunned, jaws practically hitting the floor. There were only two people who remained composed. One was Hwang Munyak, casually lounging like he was at a spa, and the other was Chung-myung, currently on his knees, pretending to reflect like a wise sage but clearly daydreaming about snacks. That child, you're saying that Chung-myung cured Elder Hwang and prevented a crisis in the guild? Yes. Huh. Hyun-jong flicked his gaze between Hwang Munyak and Chung-myung as if he were flipping a coin. It was unbelievable. This was the same kid who had been here for barely 3 months, barely a step above a novice. How in the world could this child pull that off? Elder, is this really true? Hwang Munyak's frown could have sliced through steel. Do you think I would lie to you? Oh, of course not. Hyun-young took a step back, suddenly aware that the Yuna Guild could snap them like a twig. After all, without Hwang Munyak's backing, Mount Hua would have been toast long ago. Treating him carelessly? A rookie mistake. I don't believe you'd do such a thing. Hyun-jong frowned, shifting his attention back to Hyun-young. It wasn't our intention. I'll apologize for what was asked, Elder Hwang. Please don't be too upset with us. Well, Hwang Munyak's displeasure was like a storm cloud hanging overhead, and he was ready to rain down on everyone. A merchant should never show too much camaraderie. Every smile could be an opportunity for someone to sneak in a trade. Quack! He suddenly coughed, eyes darting to Chung-myung, who looked like he'd just bitten into a lemon. Come on now, he thought. A third-class disciple saving his elders from a scolding? Where else would you find such absurdity? Realizing Chung-myung was silently pleading for him to lighten up, Hwang Munyak softened his expression. Eunjeom, trying to bring some clarity to the chaos, chimed in. I don't understand. Hwang Munyak raised an eyebrow. Who are you? I am Mount Hua's Eunjeom. I'm in charge of the dorms the disciples reside in. Ah, I see. So, Eunjeom, you're saying you don't believe my words? That's not the case. I just have a fundamental question. Does Chung-myung even have the ability to cure such ailments? A fair question, really. Everyone turned their skeptical gazes toward Elder Hwang and Chung-myung, who were exchanging looks that screamed, uh-oh, that isn't difficult. Can you explain? Yes, as you all know, I was a beggar, right? Yes. Beggars tend to pick up anything edible, which means they often get sick and poisoned. Wait, are you saying this child was poisoned? Hyun-sang interjected, eyes wide. Yes, but it's a bit more complicated than that. You see, beggars can end up poisoned in ways the average person wouldn't expect. They know all about edible poisons better than most. Taking a deep breath, he continued. Five-shade grass is a common plant that's deceptively similar to mugwort, but actually packs a poisonous punch. Birds eat it and often get sick. The poison creeps in, leaving you suffering for days until, well, you know the end of that story. The room was wrapped with attention. However, detoxifying it is simpler than you think. Even a physician might not know how, but if you feed the victim a ground radish, they can recover. So, Elder Huang was poisoned with the five-shade grass? Yes, the symptoms matched, so I thought I'd give it a shot, and voila, he got better. No, Han Sang started. I've heard that the Beggars Union has some of the best poison remedies. Right? Chung Myung thought, stifling a laugh. Go ahead, ask the Beggars Union. They'll back me up. Life is a battlefield of supply, he mused internally. Getting supplies to the front line is tougher than explaining quantum physics to a cat. So yeah, we beggars know a thing or two about eating questionable stuff. What a twist! Hyun-jong exclaimed, suddenly wide-eyed. Should we really cause a fuss over Chung Myung being a few days late when someone's life was on the line? You did a great job. Everyone looked at Chung Myung like he was a golden statue suddenly come to life. Sect leader, Ungeam said, trying to regain composure. If this is true, shouldn't we reward him instead of punishing him? Yeah, I guess. Hyun-jong's eyes widened in realization. But, sect leader, Unam protested, it's a grave sin to ignore orders. No matter how good his intentions were, he was wrong. Are my orders more important than a man's life? Hyun-jong shot back. That... Should we praise a disciple for letting someone die just so he could return on time? Unam fell silent. Mount Hua pursues justice. What takes priority over saving lives? Are my petty orders worth more than that? I was short-sighted, Unam admitted, looking at the floor. With a significant glance exchanged between Unam and Hyun-jong, the latter decided this topic needed to die faster than a cockroach at a family gathering. Chung Myung, Hyun-jong said, shifting focus. Well done. Yes, sect leader. Chung Myung bowed, chest puffed out like a peacock. As the tension eased, Hwang Munyak spoke up, grinning like a Cheshire cat. The Yunha Guild and I owe much to Mount Hua. Well, to be precise, I owe Chung Myung, but he insists it's all thanks to your teachings. Oh, such humility. Hwang Munyak laughed internally. Everything is smoothed over. However, speaking the truth, better to keep Chung Myung and Mount Hua cozy in everyone's minds. So, to repay the kindness I received, I'd like to make a little investment in Mount Hua. Investment? Yes. Or maybe support is a better term. An investment implies a return, but if it's support, it's all good. You've already given so much to Mount Hua. Sect leader, Hwang Munyak insisted. If I was planning to stop here, I wouldn't have brought my whole entourage. I want to pour everything I have into Mount Hua. Hanjong's eyes nearly popped out. Elder Hwang? Despite Hanjong's surprise, Hwang Munyak just smiled like a proud papa. We brought our people so we can take this slowly. What Mount Hua needs and what we can provide will all be discussed. Thank you. Thank you very much, Elder Hwang. No need to thank me. Life can't be measured in money. It always falls short. Hwang Munyak and Hyun-jong glanced at Chung Myung, who was looking more and more like a kid who just accidentally set the kitchen on fire. Hyun-jong, still grinning, said, You've brought a blessing to Mount Hua and helped spread our name. I'm almost embarrassed. Don't say that. If I hadn't learned anything here, could I have done that? Hwang Munyak was taken aback. Look at this smooth talker. Then, apart from the finance head and Unam, everyone else can leave to rest. Yes, sect leader. As everyone stood, Hyun-jong called out, And Chung Myung, I'll need to speak with you later, so don't wander too far. Yes. Chung Myung nodded, leaving the room with the others. As they stepped outside, Hyun-sang slapped him on the shoulder. You did well. That was amazing. Oh, it was nothing really. What you did was monumental. How can it not be? Saving a life, especially Elder Huang's, is no small feat. A shooting star must have graced Mount Hua today. That shooting star? Chung Myung was the only one shining in the room. He sighed, watching his peers attribute his achievements to mere luck. What's a guy to do when they're this happy? Just then, Eun-jeom approached. Chung Myung. Yes, Doormaster? I know you did a good job, but you handled it poorly. Leaving Mount Hua without a word? Tsk, tsk. I was in a hurry, Chung Myung protested. That's understandable, but you need to be cautious. What you did this time was riskier than you thought. Yes, I'll be more careful. And remember, disobeying the sect leader's orders is serious. You can't just blame it on circumstances. Yes. Chung Myung bowed, feeling a pout forming. Why is this guy so rigid? But looking up and seeing Eunjeom's lips twitching, he realized the man was fighting back a grin. Ahem, just keep doing what you're doing, but be careful. Look at him, Chung Myung thought, amused. Everyone came forward, patted him on the back, and congratulated him. Elder Huang in Mount Hua held more significance than Chung Myung had initially grasped. He was the kind of person who could provide money, and those with money were always welcome, especially in a sect where funds were tighter than a pair of old shoes. It seems like Mount Hua's luck is finally turning around. Good fortune keeps finding us lately. Luck? Everything stemmed from Chung Myung. He sighed internally, feeling the weight of his so-called blessings. Ah, Sahyung, my back is starting to ache now. He could almost hear his Sahyung laughing at him from the heavens, probably enjoying this whole scenario from a cloud above. As the praise continued, Chung Myung couldn't help but wonder when this whirlwind of chaos would settle down. But hey, at least he was the hero of the day, if only in a roundabout way. With a final chuckle, he stepped back, bracing himself for whatever hilarious escapades awaited him next. Episode 64, Sect Leader. That one is the God of Wealth. 4. Mount Hua was in chaos. And no, I don't mean the usual chaos of martial artists bickering over the last dumpling. This was a whole new level of fuss. Elder Wang was saved? One disciple exclaimed, his eyes wide like a kid who just found out Santa was real. Who is Elder Wang? Another asked, scratching his head as if it would help him understand the universe. The greatest merchant of the Yunha Guild. Even if all the merchants of Huam gathered, they wouldn't stand a chance against Elder Huang. Whoa! So he's a big deal, huh? Exactly. Chung Myung saved someone that important. Wow, this is really odd. I know, right? Why would he? The disciples were excited but utterly confused. Chung Myung's reputation was about to soar like a kite on a windy day. Jo Gul chuckled. I wondered what he was getting himself into. Yeah, he's like a ghost that keeps popping up at the right time. Maybe the heavens are throwing him a bone? Isn't it too much luck? Yoonjong replied, raising an eyebrow. Luck? Nah, it's skill. Jo Gul tilted his head, clearly not buying it. Yoonjong elaborated. Chung Myung earned his stripes getting sent to Hua We would have just been busy telling our elders to handle it. He took the risk, and it paid off. True. He could have bombed the whole operation. Jo Gul nodded, his skepticism fading. Luck opens the door, but skill walks through it. Focus on honing your skills instead of whining about luck. Yes, Sahyung. Jo Gul sighed. Sahyung is starting to sound like a nagging parent. Yoonjong had changed lately. He was more of a leader now. The others fell silent, contemplating Yoonjong's wise words while he continued, but I'm worried. About what? Sure, his skills got him here, but his status is going to shoot up. Chung Myung had racked up a laundry list of contributions to Mount Hua, and he was bound to attract attention like a bee to honey. Sigh. The White Plum Blossom boarding house was filled with sighs, but they were about to turn to cheers. Elder Huang has taken over the businesses in Hua someone exclaimed. Lucky us. With him in charge, we can trust him. Hyunjung could hardly contain his glee. I'm so happy I can't even brew tea without spilling it. What? Elder Huang had offered to manage their business without charge, promising hefty compensation. All he wanted in return? 2 little favors. Invest the profits back into Mount Hua and give special treatment to the third-class disciple, Chung Myung. Investing back is fine, Hyunjong thought, nodding. But preferential treatment? That's vague. Hyunjong glanced at Am, who looked just as puzzled. What kind of preferential treatment do you give a third-class disciple? He's already got privileges most wouldn't dream of. Hyunjong's head throbbed. This is good, Am finally spoke up, drawing attention. The reason Elder Huang asked is that Chung Myung saved him from a horrible fate, he said. Well, he's such a good kid. How does he only do good deeds? Is he some kind of spirit? Someone mused. Am coughed, trying to rein in the tangents. Shouldn't we reward him again? Absolutely. He deserves it. The room filled with nods of agreement, and Hyunjong grinned. All right, let's brainstorm rewards. Why not teach him a martial art he usually couldn't learn? Someone suggested. Oh, that's a good idea. Why not the 7 Sages' sword? That'd make him happy. Definitely. But just as Hyunjong was about to solidify plans, a voice interrupted. No! Hyunjong turned to see finance head Hyun Young, looking like he'd just bitten into a sour lemon. Are you serious? Martial arts as a reward? What kind of twisted logic is that? It's a reward? Hyun Young exploded. Do you think that giving him more training is a gift? He's already busy. That's punishment wrapped in a nice bow. Everyone exchanged confused glances. That's no reward. A reward should feel significant, like you're parting with something important. Get it? Hyunjong blinked, completely baffled. Hadn't Han Young been the one wanting to punish Chung Myung last meeting? Do you think this is some regular contribution? Elder Wang's life was saved, and now money is flowing into Mount Hua. He's practically the savior of our finances. Ah, now it made sense. Hyun Young was the finance guru, struggling to keep Mount Hua afloat. This was a financial miracle. Hyun Young, eyes wide with fervor, continued, give him a proper reward. This kid is the god of wealth. If you give him something good, he'll bring in more. God of wealth? Yes, this child is a genius. Do you realize how much money he's generated? Right. As Hyun Young ranted, Hyun Sang quietly pulled him out of the room, mumbling about needing a chill pill. Hyun Jong sighed. I hope you all understand. He's been through a lot. We understand, they replied, exchanging knowing glances. And we sympathize, truly? Unam, seizing the moment, spoke again. Chung Myung should be rewarded appropriately. I agree with Hyun Young. Yes, everyone chorused. Hyun Jong nodded. So what's the reward? Silence reigned until Unam suggested, he likes going down Mount Hua. Let's make him our liaison with the Unha Guild. Isn't that just making him an errand boy? Not really a reward, someone replied. Elder Huang likes Chung Myung, so he'd treat him well. Good point. Ideas began to flow. How about a plum blossom sword? A wooden sword would suit him better. Let's give him food instead. He's not a stray cat. What's he going to do with a meal? Hyun Young burst back in. Just give him cash. What are we debating when we have money to spare? You old-timers are infuriating. Hyun Sang quickly pulled him out again. Ugh, Hyun Jong thought, rubbing his temples. Things have been looking up, but this feels like a circus. Yet, maybe that was just the way of Mount Hua now? Or was it all in his head? Chung Myung is a problem wrapped in a riddle, Hyunjong mused, watching the door swing closed behind Han Young. Every time we think we've got a handle on him, he pulls another trick. Maybe he's just lucky? One disciple quipped, earning a round of eye rolls. Luck? That kid practically creates his own luck. Yoonjong chimed in, smirking. He's like a martial arts magnet. More like a magnet for trouble, Jo Gul added, folding his arms. Every time he shows up, chaos follows. But he brings good chaos, Unam interjected, like the kind that makes our finances look less like a dumpster fire. As the discussion continued, Han Jong realized they were veering into a comedy show territory. All right, let's refocus. We need to figure out how to reward him properly. Money, obviously, someone suggested. Cash it is. But how much? Another chimed in, raising an eyebrow. We can't just toss him a few coins and call it a day. Han Jong rubbed his chin, thinking, how about a scholarship for martial arts training? You know, to hone that skill we've been discussing. Scholarship? What is this? A fancy school? Jo Gul chuckled. He'll probably use it to fund a trip to the local tavern. He'll need a tutor for that, Yoonjong shot back. And I'd prefer someone who isn't a fan of a certain famous spirit. Laughter erupted, breaking the tension in the room. Okay, but seriously, Hyunjong said, raising a hand for quiet. We need to ensure that whatever reward we give, it reflects his contributions. We can't just make it a joke. Right. Let's keep it practical, Unam suggested. A real reward that acknowledges his skills but doesn't overwhelm him. Maybe we could give him a percentage of the profits? Someone proposed, and the room went quiet. Wait a minute, are you saying we give him money? Hyunjong asked, eyes widening. Are we seriously considering this? Why not? He saved Elder Wang's life. Fair point, another disciple agreed. He deserves a cut of the profits. Just think of it as his finder's fee. Finder's fee? Jo Gul laughed. More like a let's keep this kid happy so he doesn't burn our house down fee. Exactly, Yoonjong added, grinning. We don't want him turning into an even bigger problem. The discussion swirled around various reward ideas, each one more ludicrous than the last, until Hyunjong finally cleared his throat. Enough! Let's put this to a vote. Who thinks we should just hand him a bag of gold and call it a day? Laughter filled the room again, and hands shot up. Fine, we'll go with the cash option then, he said, shaking his head with a smile. But let's make sure he knows it's for his efforts, and not just because we're scared of him. Agreed. He needs to know he's appreciated, Unam said, nodding earnestly. As the meeting wrapped up, Hyunjong couldn't shake the feeling that they were all about to step into an even wilder adventure thanks to Chung Myung. God of wealth, huh? He muttered to himself, smiling. I hope he's ready for the responsibility. As the disciples began to disperse, Yoonjong nudged Jogul. So, what do you think Chung Myung will do with his finder's fee? Probably throw a feast and invite all his friends. Or just the ones who pay for their own drinks, Jogul replied with a smirk. Better than blowing it on something ridiculous, like a new wooden sword, Yoonjong laughed. Or a fancy new outfit. He'll just wear it out to a tavern, Jogul added. Let's just hope he doesn't decide to become the god of poverty next, Yoonjong joked as they exited the hall. Can't believe we're rewarding him like this, Hyunjong said, shaking his head as he watched them leave. But if anyone can turn a sect around, it's him. And with that thought, he felt a strange mix of excitement and dread for what was to come next. Episode 65, Sect Leader. That one is the god of wealth. Wang Munyak sat opposite Chun Myung, sipping his tea like a man contemplating life's deepest mysteries, or maybe just how to avoid a particularly bad case of indigestion. Chung Myung frowned slightly, his expression saying, "This tea is almost as bitter as our current situation. How is it?" Wang Munyak asked, his tone casual, but his eyes sharp enough to cut glass. You say the strangest things from time to time, Chung Myung replied, raising an eyebrow like he'd just found a cockroach in his food. There is nothing wrong with asking, Wang Munyak shot back, his eyes glinting with mischief as he tried to read Chung Myung's reaction. It was a peculiar sight, an elder speaking on equal footing with a kid who had a penchant for trouble. Am I really having a heart-to-heart with a child? Wang Munyak thought. He wondered if he was losing his touch or if the kid was just that charmingly reckless. Aren't we in the same boat now? Wang Munyak ventured. Boat? Chung Myung chuckled. It was luck that I saved Elder Wang. Being on the same boat feels like I'd be stuck with a leaky vessel. I have no desire to be on the same boat as Mount Hua, Wang Munyak declared, almost proudly. Chung Myung narrowed his eyes, thinking, this guy is too honest for his own good. To be precise, without you, Mount Hua is of no interest to me. You are overestimating my worth, Chung Myung replied, waving a hand dismissively. Wang Munyak smirked. Young disciple, I am a merchant. I've lived my life counting coins and sometimes counting the number of people who owe me money. As a merchant, my only weapon is my keen eye for people. Chung Myung raised an eyebrow, probably imagining Wang Munyak as a pirate counting doubloons. If my eyes were wrong, I'd be a failed merchant by now. And let me tell you, failure is a bitter pill to swallow. Kind of like this tea. But if I'm right, he leaned in conspiratorially. Wouldn't good fortune be in the future for both Yunha and Mount Hua? Chung Myung scratched his cheek, pondering. Well, let's not throw around phrases like same boat. I'm not a fan. Sounds like a setup for a backstabbing. Why? Wang Munyak asked, feigning innocence. People who say such things usually end up twisting the knife, Chung Myung replied, recalling all those times kindness had bitten him in the backside. I don't like such phrases either. A boat can be a place to get on and off whenever you want, Wang Munyak conceded. Yes, I suppose so, Chung Myung agreed, eyeing Huang like he was trying to read a particularly confusing menu. But, Wang Munyak grinned. If we're both headed for the same destination, why not row together? It's less tiring that way. Chung Myung considered, then nodded. Fair point. Less rowing, more snacking. Wang Munyak's eyes lit up. This kid gets it, he thought, convinced that whatever happened next would be a win-win. Listen, young disciple, he continued, the Unha Merchant Guild is ready to support Mount Hua. You understand the implications, right? Are you breaking up with the Southern Edge sect? Chung Myung asked, half joking. Exactly, Wang Munyak replied, smirking. But I expect no rewards. I just want you to be aware of our plans. Sure. You just want to keep me in the loop, huh? Very considerate of you, Chung Myung said, sarcasm dripping from his voice like the tea. I'll visit often, Wang Munyak promised, clearly enjoying the banter. Yes, the sect leader said I'd be the one to go if anyone needed to travel to Unha, Chung Myung added, stifling a laugh at the thought of being sent on an errand. That's great news. I hope we can share some laughs in the future, Wang Munyak chuckled. As they both laughed, a silent battle raged in their minds. This quick-witted little brat? Wang Munyak thought, gritting his teeth. How dare you try to pull one over on me? I've dealt with far worse. Chung Myung shot back mentally. Young disciple, Wang Munyak said, his tone suddenly serious. Yes? Chung Myung replied, unsure of what was coming next. This is the gamble of my life, Wang Munyak declared. That's something a young man should say, Chung Myung shot back, pretending to be unimpressed. I feel like I've gained a new life thanks to your help. Betting on a new life sounds reasonable, Wang Munyak insisted. Right, and I'm sure your gambling debts will also magically disappear, Chung Myung quipped. Wang Munyak stood up, eyeing Chung Myung carefully. I have one piece of advice in return for saving my life. Go on, Chung Myung said, suddenly interested. You're excellent. Even if you searched the entire world, you'd struggle to find someone more capable at your age, Wang Munyak flattered. Thank you for your kind words, Chung Myung replied, all too aware that the compliment came with strings attached. But you should probably stay hidden for a while. The world is a scary place, ghouls and ghosts and demons everywhere. Show yourself, and they'll come running like it's a Black Friday sale. Chung Myung smiled bitterly. You flatter me. I'm just a kid. I've said what I needed to. Goodbye for now, Wang Munyak said, turning to leave. Ah, wait a minute, Chung Myung called. Yes? Wang Munyak turned, curiosity piqued. I need you to find out a few things for me. Could you help me out? Wang Munyak smirked, his interest renewed. Sure, just don't expect me to pick up your laundry. With that, he closed the door behind him, and Wang Zhongyi approached. Did you have a good conversation, father? Zhongyi asked, his eyes wide with curiosity. How did the discussions with the village below the mountain go? Wang Munyak inquired, his mind still buzzing. From today on, we're placing subordinates within Hua. If we distribute goods smartly, we'll stabilize businesses before 10 days are up. 10 days? Too long. Even if we take a loss, settle this within 3 days. We need to show off a little. Wang Munyak insisted, his voice suddenly full of authority. Yes, father, Zhongyi replied, trying to keep up. The young disciple? Zhongyi began, but hesitated. Wang Munyak glanced back at the door, pondering, that kid is a monster. Mount Hua, he mused, a sly grin spreading across his face. I'd rather call it the dragon's lair. Zhongyi looked puzzled. Nothing, let's move, Wang Munyak chirped, walking away with a spring in his step. Behind White Plum Blossom Hall, Chung Myung observed the two adults leaving. That old man just doesn't quit, he muttered, shaking his head. Dealing with Wang Munyak was a whole different game than with Hun Zhong or the other elders. Those guys were wise, but lived in a dream world. Huang was sharp as a tack and way more calculating. Whatever, it all worked out, Chung Myung said to himself, smirking. Wang Munyak would keep helping Mount Hua, and that was a relief. Wealth? Nah. Wang Munyak was all about making Mount Hua's name famous again. As a martial arts sect, they needed to reclaim their identity, loud and clear. Chung Myung looked up at the blue sky, grinning wide. Well, one problem solved, Sa-young. How was that? Do you think I did well? He imagined his Sa-young smiling down from the clouds, probably shaking his head. You idiot! It serves you right. Now, do you understand how hard it is? This is just the first step, Chung Myung murmured to himself, realizing there was still a long road ahead. With the biggest obstacle for Mount Hua out of the way, he felt a surge of determination. They had wealth, and it was time to focus on their martial arts. If the Southern Edge sect had lost their identity, Mount Hua had to reclaim theirs. Chung Myung got up, stretching. Ugh, when will the kids grow up? Looking down at Mount Hua, he felt a wave of satisfaction. Change was brewing, and for once, it felt good. Laying back down, he sighed. Sa-young, I should have listened more to your nagging. I finally understand your worries. Closing his eyes, he reminisced about the days when he'd hide from his Sa-young, who was always ready to scold him. Mount Hua was still Mount Hua. It was... With the petals dancing in the gentle breeze, Chung Myung reflected on the journey ahead. Time to turn things around, he muttered, a spark of determination igniting within him. Now, Let's see how to get these kids to grow up faster, he exclaimed, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. As he strolled through the grounds of Mount Hua, he thought about how he could mold his fellow disciples into the champions they needed to be. I'll whip them into shape faster than a merchant counting his coins. The sun was shining bright, and the air was filled with the fragrance of plum blossoms. It felt like the world was conspiring to lift his spirits. Sa-hyung, I can almost hear your laughter from up there, he said, looking up at the sky as if expecting a response. With a renewed sense of purpose, Chung-myung started plotting out training sessions that would be both grueling and, let's face it, a bit ridiculous. I can already see it. Training that combines martial arts with a dash of madness. Who wouldn't want to learn to fight while balancing on one foot? The thought made him chuckle. He could picture his disciples struggling, and it filled him with glee. It'll build character, and probably a few bruises, but hey, no pain, no gain. As he walked, he caught sight of the younger disciples gathered in a huddle, looking confused. What are they plotting now? He wondered, moving closer. Just then, one of them spotted him and said, "Si Heng, we were just discussing how to improve our training regimen." "Ah, I see. And what brilliant ideas do you have?" he asked, feigning seriousness. One brave disciple stepped forward. "We were thinking of, adding more breaks?" "Breaks? Oh, you mean like coffee breaks?" Chung-myung teased, folding his arms. "I'll let you in on a secret. Real training doesn't come with a side of pastries." The group erupted in laughter, and Chung-myung felt a wave of warmth. See, this is why we need to work harder. If you're going to complain, at least make it entertaining. As he guided them through exercises that mixed martial arts with absurd challenges, like battling imaginary foes while balancing on their heads, he couldn't help but feel that Mount Hua was finally on the right path. Just wait until the Southern Edge sect sees us training like this. They'll think we've lost our minds, he exclaimed, like grinning from ear to ear. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a golden glow over the mountain, Chung-myung knew that while challenges lay ahead, they were ready to face anything together. With laughter and determination, Mount Hua would rise again, stronger, bolder, and definitely more entertaining. And as the first spring plum blossoms bloomed, so too would the new era of Mount Hua. Episode 66. Don't worry, I'll make you win. 1. The power of the Unha Merchant Guild was genuinely shocking. In just a few days, they managed to stabilize and overhaul the Hua businesses, something Mount Hua had floundered at despite all their disciples trying. You could practically see the sun reflecting off Hun Young's smile, which at this point seemed glued to his face. Have you eaten? He asked with a gleam in his eye that could melt ice. Yes, elder, replied Chung-myung, trying not to roll his eyes. Good, good. Hyun-young patted Chung-myung's hair, radiating more warmth than a summer day. Eat a lot, earn more good things. What? Chung-myung blinked, his face contorting with confusion. No, I mean, raise Mount Hua's reputation, Hyun-young backpedaled, his face the picture of innocence. The third-class disciples gawked in disbelief. Hyun-young, usually a snake in human form, was now fluffing up someone's hair like a proud parent at a kindergarten graduation. Chung-myung felt like a sacrificial lamb, smiling nervously under the weight of expectations. Am I being groomed for something? Like a bizarre training montage? He thought, eyeing the elders who were practically glowing with youth, as if rejuvenated by the recent successes. Meanwhile, time flowed like a river, and Mount Hua seemed to settle into a rare tranquility. But of course, not everyone was enjoying the peaceful life. Ah! Came the cry of a third-class disciple, his voice echoing dramatically across the training grounds. Oh my God! Another wailed, his dramatic flair not lost in the chaos. These poor souls, burdened with boulders that could qualify as a new workout trend, sweat poured from them like they were participating in a sauna competition. Ack! One gasped, struggling to do push-ups while fighting the urge to weep. My waist, another lamented, clearly questioning his life choices. Stop whining. You made it this far, a disciple barked. Straighten your back. Seriously, I'm gonna die. Not if you finish 2 more. Come on, last one. With a final push-up completed, one disciple crumpled. Are we gonna die like this? No one's died yet. Calm down. Right. They began this training under duress, fear of missing meals or a good old-fashioned beatdown. But after months of grueling effort, something miraculous happened. They started to notice real change. Whoa, I can lift this boulder without crying, one disciple proclaimed, newfound confidence shining through his exhaustion. Initially, they could barely lift sandbags, but now they were hefting stones like it was a casual afternoon stroll. Joe Gull, the once meek disciple, was now a hulking presence, lifting rocks like they were featherweights. Is he really doing this without internal chi? Someone whispered in awe. Seems like it, came the reply, eyes wide. The disciples had begun to look like a team of aspiring superheroes rather than frail underdogs. Yunjong smiled, pride swelling in his chest as he watched the transformations unfold. Wow, your bodies are so big now. It's like your swords are toothpicks, one exclaimed, flexing comically. Bring me another sandbag, Joe Gull shouted, a ridiculous grin plastered on his face. Right, I need to manage your training so you don't explode from all this enthusiasm. Yunjong chuckled, half wondering if they'd soon be crashing through walls like cartoon characters. Where's Chung Myung, anyway? Someone asked, glancing around. He's not been around much lately, Yunjong replied, furrowing his brow. He wakes up before everyone else. Is he even sleeping? Who knows? He's probably off doing something important. With the resurgence of Mount Hua, visitors had started flooding in, and the sect was thriving. Yet, Chung Myung was constantly darting between the Onaguild and Mount Hua like a caffeinated squirrel. What's our strength, Sahyung? Joe Gull suddenly asked, a serious look crossing his face. Yunjong contemplated. Strength is relative. We need to compare ourselves to ourselves? Sure, but I'm at least twice as strong as before. Just twice? I mean, I could take out at least 3 of my past selves. That's cute, but we need more than that. Right. With the upcoming conference looming, Yunjong sighed, already strategizing. Let's ask Chung Myung for some new training. Chung Myung, meanwhile, was on a mission of his own, scaling the mountain for some serious sword practice. He had to reach the peak of his abilities, and that didn't involve dawdling around. Why do I feel like I'm the only one not getting stronger, he grumbled, sweat pooling on his brow. The training was essential, but it was starting to take a toll. He couldn't afford to slack off. Enemies lurked everywhere, waiting for a chance to pounce. As he neared his training spot, he spotted an unexpected figure, a mysterious woman dancing with her sword under the moonlight. Wow, he murmured, captivated by her graceful movements. Suddenly, the serenity shattered. Who's there? She shouted, spinning toward him, sword poised at his throat. Ah! He blinked, half in awe, half panicked. Who are you? I don't remember seeing someone like you here before, she demanded, her sword gleaming ominously. That's exactly what I want to ask. And so began the next chapter of their unexpectedly dramatic and potentially life-threatening adventure. Chung Myung raised his hands defensively, still staring at the sword that was uncomfortably close to his neck. Hey, I'm just a passerby. No need to stab first and ask questions later. The woman narrowed her eyes, clearly not impressed with his defense. Passerby, you're not just anyone, are you? What are you doing here at this hour? I could ask you the same thing, practicing my swordsmanship in secret, he replied, a bit too defensively. Practicing? She tilted her head, skepticism written all over her face. That's not a practice. That's a dance with death. Then I guess I'm dancing on the wrong stage, he quipped, trying to lighten the mood despite the blade's proximity. The tension hung thick in the air as they sized each other up. Chung Myung couldn't shake the feeling that this woman was not just any ordinary swordsman. There was a grace and power in her movements that hinted at years of training, possibly even a lineage he might recognize. Who are you, really? She asked, her voice softer now, though the sword remained firmly at the ready. Chung Myung, he said, finally getting his act together and putting on a charming smile. The Plum Blossom Sword Saint, if you've heard of me. Plum Blossom Sword Saint? She lowered her sword slightly, but her expression remained skeptical. You look more like a wandering child than a sword saint. Hey, I may look young, but I can cut a mean apple, he protested, his pride stinging a bit. Cutting apples doesn't quite make you a sword saint, she smirked, and he couldn't help but admire her quick wit. All right, fair point, he conceded. But I'm trying to get stronger, you know? I can't let Mount Hua be pushed around anymore. Then train properly. With me, she challenged, stepping back and gesturing to the space around them. What? He blinked. You want to spar? Now? Why not? Unless you're afraid I'll break your precious sword saint ego, she teased, a playful glint in her eye. Oh, I'm not afraid. Bring it on, he declared, puffing out his chest. They took their stances, swords raised, and in that moment, all hesitation melted away. As they began to move, Chung Myung felt the familiar rush of adrenaline surge through him. Her movements were fluid, the way she wielded her sword mesmerizing, and he couldn't help but match her rhythm. They clashed and danced, each blow ringing out like a melody against the backdrop of the quiet night. It felt like a performance, each strike a note, and together they were composing a song of strength and skill. But as the sparring continued, Chung Myung realized something. This woman was strong. Like, really strong. Each of her strikes tested his limits, and he could feel himself being pushed to the edge. Finally, with one swift move, she disarmed him, sending his sword flying. It landed several feet away, and Chung Myung found himself staring down the tip of her blade once more. Yield? She asked, a smirk dancing on her lips. Okay, I yield, he laughed, holding up his hands in defeat. You're good? Good? I'd say I'm exceptional, she teased, finally retracting her sword. Chung Myung scrambled to retrieve his weapon, still panting slightly. Who taught you? My family, she replied, the light in her eyes dimming for a brief moment. I was taught to never let my guard down and to always be ready. I get that, he said, thinking of all the threats Mount Hua faced. I'm just trying to get stronger to protect my home. Your home? Mount Hua, you mean? Yeah, he nodded. We've had our ups and downs, but I won't let it fall again. She regarded him with newfound respect. Then I suppose we share a common goal. Want to join forces? I could use someone like you on my side, he proposed, his excitement bubbling over. Interesting proposal, she mused. But what would you offer in return? A partnership. I'll teach you about Mount Hua, and you can teach me those crazy moves of yours. Plus, you can help me keep the others in line. She pretended to ponder, though her smile was infectious. You might just have a deal, Chung Myung. Awesome. So, what's your name? Mysterious sword dancer? Jin Yun, she replied with a slight bow. Nice to meet you, Jin Yun. Now, let's train together. I have a feeling I'm going to need all the help I can get. With the moonlight shining down, the two of them began to practice, not just as individual warriors, but as allies bound by a shared ambition. As the night wore on, Chung Myung felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. With allies like Jin Yun by his side, maybe, just maybe, Mount Hua would rise stronger than ever. And who knows? Maybe one day they would take down those who dare to challenge their home, together. Hey, can we dance like that more often? Chung Myung asked playfully, feeling a surge of camaraderie. Jin Yun laughed. Only if you promise not to drop your sword next time. With that, they resumed their training, both knowing that the future held challenges, but also the potential for greatness. Episode 67, Don't Worry, I'll Make You Win. 2. The woman glared at Chung Myung with ice-cold eyes as if she could freeze him in place. Meanwhile, Chung Myung was piecing together some critical information about this mysterious figure. First, she was definitely from Mount Hua. The emblem on her uniform was a dead giveaway. Only disciples of Mount Hua strutted around with that badge of honor. Second, damn, any man would be mesmerized by her, he thought, appreciating her beauty. In his previous life, Chung Myung had been around the block. He'd seen plenty of stunning women, but this one? She had an aura that screamed, look but don't touch. He wasn't the type to get swept away by mere appearances. After all, he had a reputation as Mount Hua's notorious delinquent, someone who didn't stay put in one place for too long and was more likely to knock someone out than to flirt. Yeah, he'd had his fun, and he definitely put the beat in beat the competition. They always started it, he reminded himself, thinking back to all the epic showdowns that cemented Mount Hua's reputation as a sword-fighting powerhouse. But was it really his duty to elevate Mount Hua's status? Nah, that was on the elders. Yet somehow he ended up being the one cleaning up the mess. Still, he couldn't help but appreciate this woman's beauty. She was like a flower just waiting to bloom, ebony hair, striking eyes, and skin like fresh snow. If he were a kid again, he'd probably be tripping over his words. Who are you? She demanded. A human, he shot back, deadpan. She brought her sword dangerously close to his throat. Ah, shit! She doesn't know how to joke, he thought, internally panicking. Mount Hua's uniform, he said, trying to keep it cool. Her gaze dropped to the emblem on his chest. I don't remember seeing your face. Who are you? It's my first time seeing you here, too, he replied, a mischievous smirk creeping onto his face. A third-class disciple? She inquired, narrowing her eyes. Yep. Third-class disciples aren't allowed outside after sunset, she said, a hint of accusation in her voice. I'm exempt from that rule. What? The sect leader gave me permission. Her eyebrows shot up. The sect leader? Yes. To a third-class disciple? Yep, a lie. Chung Myung shrugged, his silence saying it all. Go and confirm it yourself. Do you think a disciple of Mount Hua would lie using the sect leader's name? She hesitated, her expression wavering. So put that sword away. You might hurt someone, he suggested, grinning. To his surprise, she lowered her weapon. Apparently, throwing around the sect leader's name had some weight. It's wrong to watch other people's training, she retorted, crossing her arms. This is where I trained until yesterday. A random stranger shows up, and I'm supposed to just sit back? Should have revealed yourself the moment you noticed someone, she said, clearly still not over it. A stranger suddenly appears and you want me to announce my presence? Yeah, right. Her face flushed slightly. She clearly struggled with this banter thing. Not very good with words, are we? He mused. Her sword was sharp, but her tongue, not so much. What's your name? She finally asked. Chung Myung. You received a name from the sect? Nope. My name is Chung Myung. Third-class disciples should have Chung attached to their names, but this isn't a sect name. It's just yours? Exactly. Even if they give me another name, I'll still stick with Chung Myung. Ah! Shit, this woman might be a bit dense. I'm Yu Yisol, she finally stated. Okay, he replied, a bit too quickly. Yu Yisol scrutinized him, her expression unreadable. What? He asked, raising an eyebrow. I'm a second-class disciple. I am Baek, and I am your senior. Huh? Chung Myung blinked. There are Baeks. Of course there were. Mount Hua named its disciples like a cheesy soap opera. Chung, Myung, Hyung, Baek. It was like a never-ending cycle of names. It's the first time I'm hearing about this, he said, shrugging. You're the youngest disciple at Mount Hua, right? Yep. Didn't your Sahyungs tell you? Why would they? They're too busy bossing me around. Well. Chung Myung nodded, finally realizing he should probably pay more attention to the hierarchy of names. Is that the end? What? Your greeting? Chung Myung's face contorted with confusion. What is this kid saying? Is she seriously expecting me to bow or something? Yes. Nice to meet you. He offered the most emotionless greeting ever. Now go away. He needed to train. He didn't want to waste daylight because of this distraction. The sun was about to rise, and his training time was slipping away. What a weird kid, she muttered, clearly baffled. Me? Chung Myung thought, rolling his eyes. Yu Yisol turned, ready to leave. I'm going to check with the sect leader about your claims. If you lied, you better prepare for the consequences. Chung Myung smirked. By all means, go. She stared at him, clearly debating whether he was worth the effort. Really weird, she concluded, shaking her head as she walked away. Chung Myung sighed as he watched her disappear into the distance. Ah, my fate! Being treated like a child was the absolute worst. And my training time is over. Sure, he could still train, but his mind was racing with so many questions that he knew it'd just be a waste of time. Why does this keep happening? Just when I want to train, someone else interrupts. He bit his lip in frustration. Maybe it was time to find a new training spot. As he entered the dining hall, he couldn't shake the gloomy vibe hanging in the air. It was the kind of atmosphere that made you question your life choices. What's with this mood? He asked, confused. Yoonjong waved him over. You're here? Chung Myung grabbed his meal and plopped down next to Yoonjong and Jo Gul. What's up with everyone? Our seniors are back, Yoonjong replied, his voice tinged with worry. The Baek bastards? Oh, you know them? Of course I do. I've been living here my entire life. Anyway, so what? What's the big deal about their return? First of all, don't call the Baek disciples Baek. It'll get complicated if they hear you say that. We might get scolded too. Me or you? I need to think about that, Yoonjong said, a sheepish smile on his face. The seniors have been away for closed-door training. Their old training centers were a mess, so they couldn't train here. So they went to another sect? Not exactly. I don't think they just went anywhere. Okay, so what's making everyone so gloomy? Do they have bad personalities? Do they bully other disciples? Unlike someone else, our seniors don't beat us. Wonder who that someone else is. Let's move on. Yunjong looked flustered, but Joe Gould jumped in to save the conversation. It's because of the conference. What conference? Not just any conference. The Mount Hua and Southern Edge Sects Conference. What's that? Joe Gould sighed, clearly regretting his life choices. Once in a while, both sects come together. We compete every 2 years to see who's better. Ah, I think I heard about this somewhere. When did it start? Don't know. It's been going on for ages. Yunjong added, I heard the first conference was meant to happen every 5 years, initially to foster friendship between the sects, but over time it morphed into a competition for second and third class disciples. Compete? Don't call it that. Someone else chimed in. It's more like we get beaten one-sidedly. Even now, where I got hit still hurts. How can we survive this time? The seniors went to train for our sake, and this is nuts. Chung Myung took in the dreary atmosphere. Ah, so they're dumping the fighting on the second and third class disciples to avoid trouble? And we've been the punching bags all along? Right. To prevent a repeat of our past humiliations, the seniors went into closed-door training, and now the conference is just around the corner. Is that so? Chung Myung's lips curled into a wicked grin. We're going to compete with the Southern Edge Sect, huh? The Southern Edge Sect? The name made his blood boil. Every situation lately only deepened his hatred for them. Once upon a time, he felt a twinge of pity for the Southern Edge, but after learning they had the audacity to copy Mount Hua's sword techniques, he couldn't even catch a decent night's sleep. Competition, he mused, his thoughts racing. In the past, Mount Hua had been top dog, while the Southern Edge was just a speck on the radar. But now that Mount Hua was weak, those bastards were trying to use claims of friendship to show off their strength. How laughable! Friendly meeting with Mount Hua? He felt his eyes gleaming with determination. No matter how battered Mount Hua was now, it was still his home. Only he had the right to tear it down, not some other sect trying to strut their stuff. And those second-class bastards, he declared, shaking his head in disbelief. Chung Myung, please, they are seniors. Just call them seniors, Yunjong pleaded. Fine. Then those senior bastards. Do they think they can win? He pressed. That's a bit. Yunjong faltered, the doubt evident in his expression. Closed-door training was meant to hone in on weaknesses, but could they guarantee victory? Winning seemed like a far-off dream. Then, Chung Myung leaned in, fire in his eyes. Then we need to win. What? Sahyungs, are you all ready to do whatever it takes to win? Even if it means taking poison? Or breaking your limbs and bodies? If you can do something to beat those bastards and put Mount Hua back on the map, you're all prepared to die for it, right? Okay, maybe he was pushing it a bit too far. Don't worry, I'll make you win. I'll turn you all into the best. This was the part where everyone should have been cheering him on, but instead, he was met with blank stares. Well, it seemed like he really didn't follow the path of the Tao. Just head to Green Forest Mountain and join a bandit gang already. Why are you even here? But hey, this was a mountain too. Ha! The room filled with a mix of nervous laughter and reluctant enthusiasm. Chung Myung might have had a questionable approach, but his confidence was infectious. With his heart set on reclaiming Mount Hua's glory, he knew he'd drag everyone along for the ride, whether they liked it or not. Get ready, everyone. We're not just going to fight, we're going to crush them. For Mount Hua. And as he shouted, he couldn't help but feel the spark of determination igniting in those around him. The Southern Edge sect might think they had the upper hand, but they had no idea what they were up against. Let's make this count, he roared, feeling alive with purpose. Maybe it was time to shake things up around here. Episode 68. Don't worry, I'll make you win. 3. The second-class disciples are coming back. Hyungjong sighed heavily, as if he was about to wrestle a bear. Hearing that the kids were returning from their closed-door training was like getting a new toy, but knowing it had a missing part. How far away are they? He asked. Some seem to have already reached Huam village, and some are yet to arrive, came the response. I see. Hyunjong raised his head and looked at Un-am, whose expression screamed, I'd rather be anywhere else. Sect leader, speak. Why was the conference being held so soon? Wasn't it originally scheduled to be held in half a year? Unam asked, sounding like he just found out there was no dessert after dinner. The Southern Edge sect sent us a letter requesting it. This time they wanted to hold it earlier, Hyunjong explained, rubbing his temples. Can't we ask them to postpone it? Unam inquired, grasping at straws. That'll be difficult. Unam sighed. Mount Hua is in high spirits right now. Everything is going well, and we can live without worrying about food or our stability. Everyone is smiling brightly. Compared to a few months ago, it's a remarkable change. Yes, Hyunjong agreed, trying to ignore the nagging feeling in his gut. The energy was palpable, like the buzz before a big fight, but they still had a long way to go. But we are still a martial arts sect, Hyunjong added, his voice serious. Yes, Unam replied, nodding like a bobblehead. We did recently rediscover some of our lost martial arts from the books that were found, but it isn't yet the time to see results. Hyunjong nodded, understanding the weight of those words. That too, just a small glimmer of hope, he thought, as if he was trying to light a fire with wet matches. They could barely stay afloat. Regaining their former glory seemed as likely as finding a needle in a haystack. If the conference ends in the same result as before, I'm worried that the disciples will lose their newfound hope and turn into defeatists with no motivation. Unam fretted. Unam. Yes, sect leader? Do you think I don't know that? Hyunjong said, shaking his head like a disappointed parent. Would avoiding it or pushing it away make any difference? If we avoid it, will it quell the disciples' doubts and produce positive results? This would have to happen one way or the other. If I ask to postpone it, wouldn't the disciples believe that their own sect leader lacks faith in them? That? Unam's voice trailed off, like a balloon losing air. There's no shame in losing. If you lose despite your best efforts, it's unavoidable. They will simply have to work harder next time. But delaying the conference to avoid a loss is something we should never do. I was short-sighted, sect leader. I fully understand your concern, but it would be difficult to postpone this conference for many reasons, Unam replied, sighing as if he'd just received bad news from the doctor. Really, wouldn't it be nice if the second-class disciples can achieve good results? Right, Hyunjong said, knowing deep down that was about as likely as finding a unicorn. Unam. Yes? These children are returning after a long period of hard work. Make sure to prepare some good food and alcohol. But it'll be okay for the children to have one day of rest after all their training. Shouldn't those kids also get to experience how Mount Hua's circumstances have changed? That is true. I will prepare them without fail, Unam said, finally finding a bit of light in the gloom. Okay. I will leave then. As Unam exited, Hyunjong opened the window and sighed, looking out like a father watching his kids ride their bikes for the first time. The Southern Edge sect, it felt like a thorn was stuck in his heart. He took a breath, hoping that thorn would be cut off before it pierced deeper. It is difficult. Difficult. Meanwhile, in another part of the sect, Yoonjong and Jo-gul gathered in Chung Myung's room. We can win? Yoonjong asked, eyebrows raised. If anyone else had said something like this, they would have rolled their eyes, but with Chung Myung, it hit differently. He had a knack for making the impossible seem achievable. We? Chung Myung clicked his tongue, looking at the two like a schoolteacher sizing up the classroom. Not now. Huh? Even if we are this strong? Jo-gul asked, flexing like he was auditioning for a martial arts movie. Cy-youngs have gotten stronger, Chung Myung said, raising his thumb and index finger with a minuscule gap between them. About this much? Ah, joking. It isn't that much. I knew it. Yoonjong shot back, his face lighting up. Chung Myung doubled the gap with exaggerated flair. About this much. Jo-gul's face flushed with indignation. Hey, we've been pushing ourselves to the verge of death to change so much. Does it make sense to say we only grew that much? I can feel it in my body. It's only been a few months since you all started, and you are already on the verge of death? Chung Myung smirked, enjoying the banter. No, but we are definitely stronger than before, Jo-gul protested, crossing his arms like a pouting child. Even if an acorn grew 3 times in size, would it compare to a full-grown tree? Chung Myung countered, not letting up. Shh, Jo-gul grumbled, knowing he was being outmatched in a battle of wits. Myung assessed them seriously. Not the growth of the third-class disciples is terrifying. Growing at this rate is something I never expected, but they aren't there yet. The Southern Edge sect still loomed like a giant wall. Even defeating a third-class disciple will prove problematic in the coming conference. Then, how do we win? Yoonjong asked, eyebrows knitted in worry. It will be fine. Yoonjong frowned. The conference will begin in just a few days. If we couldn't win after months of training, what could we possibly do to catch up before they get here? Which is why I asked. Asked what? Yoonjong wondered as the tension rose. Myung chuckled. If you are prepared to die. The room went silent. Know that? Does that matter? What's important is if you are prepared. No. The moment Jo-gul was about to say something, Yoonjong interrupted him. I am resolute. Sa-young, Jo-gul exclaimed, eyes wide with disbelief. I don't know about the other Sa-youngs, but I am ready. I'm sure most of the others are willing as well. Sa-young, do you know what you're saying? I know. Yoonjong looked fierce, like a gladiator ready to enter the arena. It doesn't matter. If I die right now, at least I'll never have to see that situation again. I can still see those disgusting bastards standing over us and laughing in my dreams. That's true. Jo-gul sighed, remembering the humiliation of the last conference like a bad hangover. If I could return that humiliation, I would be willing to risk death. I'd rather turn around and go down the mountain than go through that again, Yoonjong said, the fire in his eyes undeniable. Jo-gul nodded. Well, yes, then I'll stand with you, Sa-young. I believe you. Great. Myung smiled, but something felt off in the air. But Myung, Jo-gul ventured. Yes? How will we do it? Ah, it is nothing. I'm just going to change the way that we practice. Myung replied, grinning like a mischievous child. How? Myung leaned in, eyes glinting with mischief. Practical test. Huh? Jo-gul's eyebrows shot up. What you've been learning, you should be able to apply it. I will show you how to use your body. The two disciples felt a chill run down their spines. Late at night, the third-class disciples gathered in the training hall, looking like they were about to enter a haunted house. No, do we really have to gather at night like this? Jo-gul grumbled, arms crossed in defiance. Everyone knew about their early morning practices, but nighttime was another level of madness. What the hell is he trying to do, Sa-young? He asked, bewildered. I don't know. Yoonjong shrugged, equally confused. Everyone complained, but nobody dared to walk away. They all knew that although Myung's methods were radical, they worked like magic. Is everyone here? Myung asked, striding into the hall. The third-class disciples looked at him with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. It was a look that said, we trust you, but please don't kill us. Myung, but this time the training is... Jo-gul began, only to be cut off. Shh! Myung unsheathed the sword at his waist. A real sword? It looked like a real sword. Even an ordinary person holding a sword could make hearts race, but seeing a crazed younger disciple wielding one was enough to send a chill through the room. Ah, training? Myung asked casually, slowly approaching them with the sword in hand. It is nothing much. Just that, he said, his lips twisting into a mischievous grin. All you have to do is die once. It isn't much, right? What? That crazy bastard. The third-class disciples exchanged wide-eyed glances, mouths agape as they processed the absurdity of what they just heard. Did you just say die? Jo-gul squeaked, backing away as if the sword might leap out and bite him. Relax. I mean metaphorically. You'll just be dying in the training sense. Myung clarified, his grin growing wider. It's about pushing your limits until you feel like you're dead. You know, typical training stuff. Typical? Are you sure we're not in some kind of horror movie? Yoonjong muttered, eyeing the sword as if it were a live snake. Come on, you faced worse. Remember the last conference? This is just a warm-up. Myung insisted, and suddenly his enthusiasm was infectious. Warm-up? Last time we were nearly put in a meat grinder. Jo-gul retorted, crossing his arms defiantly. Exactly. So this time, let's make sure they know who they're messing with. Myung exclaimed, his eyes shining with determination. We'll train hard, and by the time the conference comes around, they won't know what hit them. All right, fine. But if I lose a limb, I'm blaming you. Jo-gul said, reluctantly accepting his fate. Don't worry. I'll make sure to keep all your limbs intact. Mostly. Chung Myung winked, and everyone couldn't help but chuckle nervously. Let's get to it then, Yoonjong shouted, now feeling the adrenaline surge. And just like that, the night turned into a whirlwind of training, sweat, and laughter, though they would probably deny it later. Under Chung Myung's unorthodox guidance, they began to test the very limits of their abilities, learning to dance with danger instead of running away from it. As the hours rolled on, they fell into a rhythm, their fears slowly replaced by a growing confidence. And despite the absurdity of the situation, they started to believe they could stand a chance against the Southern Edge sect. By dawn, they were exhausted but exhilarated, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. See? That wasn't so bad, was it? Chung Myung said, wiping his brow, looking like a proud coach. Depends on your definition of bad, Jo Gul muttered, but he couldn't help but smile. Let's just hope it's enough, Yoonjong added, feeling a mix of hope and apprehension. Don't worry, I'll make you win, Chung Myung declared, his voice brimming with confidence. And with that, they stepped into the new day, prepared to tackle the challenges ahead, together, stronger than before, and perhaps just a little crazier than anyone else. Chung Myung's gaze slowly drifted from left to right, his eyes sharp enough to make even the bravest man reconsider his life choices. The third-class disciples, sensing danger, reacted like someone who spotted their ex at a party, instantly avoiding eye contact. Don't look at him. Pretend you're invisible, one thought, breaking into a cold sweat. Another wasn't so lucky. Shit! I got caught! They could already feel the gravitational pull of Chung Myung's lunacy dragging them into some absurd plan. His eyes glinted with the type of madness only the clinically insane or someone who's drunk on power could muster. You? Chung Myung's voice crawled out from the depths of hell itself, sending chills down everyone's spine. I don't want to see you losing to those Southern Edge bastards. His gaze was wild, unhinged. One disciple shivered, thinking, I might actually pee my pants. Another thought, is he crazier today? Is it a full moon? Did someone forget to lock his cage? It was clear as day. Even if everyone else accepted defeat, Chung Myung would rather take a bite out of his own sword than lose to the Southern Edge sect. After all, they had the audacity to steal the Plum Blossom sword technique. Chung Myung couldn't just let that go. He'd sooner declare a blood feud. Sahyungs, you need to win. Don't worry, I'll make it happen, he said with all the certainty of a man who clearly had no plan other than sheer force of will. The disciples looked around, silently praying for someone, anyone, to volunteer to be sacrificed in their place. But nope, no one stepped up. Finally, Jo Gul, his face as blank as his future prospects, spoke up. But what do you mean by that? Are we supposed to die first and be reborn stronger? Oh? Chung Myung grinned like a cat that caught the canary. Sahyung, come over here. Me? Jo Gul pointed at himself like he'd just been called to court for a crime he didn't commit. Yes. The other disciples, clearly relieved it wasn't them, nodded enthusiastically. Jo Gul stood there, betrayed. You traitors, he thought, remembering the days when loyalty among his fellow disciples was a thing. That was all before this demon of a man showed up and turned Mount Hua into a survival reality show. Come on! Quick, quick! Chung Myung urged, impatient. Jo Gul glanced back at Yoonjong, the last person he thought he could rely on. Yoonjong, ever the helpful friend, said, Go on! Now! You son of a... Jo Gul bit his tongue, but the rage was real. Trudging forward like a man headed for the gallows, Jo Gul couldn't help but feel like he was being led into an ambush. Chung Myung, now standing close enough for Jo Gul to feel the crazy radiating off him, looked deep into his eyes. You said you wanted to fight them, right? Yes. Well then, you're strong enough already. Wait, what? Jo Gul thought, confused. It's not like all that training was for nothing. You've got the strength. The only thing holding you back is, well, you. Chung Myung's smile was practically feral as he continued. So here's what we're going to do. From now on, we're going to spar. You're going to give me everything you've got, and I'll only swing my sword once. Think you can handle that? Jo Gul stared at him, thinking, did this man just seriously suggest I could win with him only swinging once? Does he think I'm stupid? But then again, his pride wouldn't let him back down. No matter how ridiculous this sounded, Jo Gul needed to believe he had a chance. Fine. He raised his wooden sword, determination flickering in his eyes. Chung Myung gave him an almost patronizing smile. Confident, are we? Jogul scoffed. Thanks to you, I trained until I was half dead. Myung laughed. Confidence is good, even if it's a bit premature. Jogul's eyes narrowed as he prepared himself. This was his moment. He wasn't about to get humiliated. Not today. With a deep breath, Jogul charged, his wooden sword raised high, burning with the energy of a man who was either incredibly brave or stupid, or both. But as Jogul swung his sword, Myung effortlessly dodged, moving as if Jogul's sword was no more threatening than a fly buzzing around his head. Jogul, however, wasn't going to be deterred. With a determined look, he shifted his stance and performed the falling petals sword technique, one of the most sophisticated moves in Mount Hua's arsenal. The onlookers gasped, visibly impressed. Even Myung nodded slightly. He's better than I thought. But just when Jogul thought he might be gaining the upper hand, Myung's next move was so quick and subtle that it felt like reality itself blinked. He slipped forward, raising his sword high above Jogul's head. In that split second, Jogul could only think, I'm about to die, aren't I? His life flashed before his eyes. All the choices he'd made, every bad decision, and most importantly, the very real regret of ever trusting Myung. Swash! The sound of the sword cutting the air was deafening. Jogul stood frozen, feeling the weight of his imminent demise. But as the sword stopped just above his head, he realized, to his horror and relief, that Myung wasn't going to kill him. Thud! Jogul's legs gave out as he collapsed backward, staring up at Myung, whose grin was wider than ever. How does it feel to die, Sahyung? Myung asked, eyes twinkling with amusement. Jogul, still trying to catch his breath and gather the pieces of his soul, thought, how does it feel? It feels like I should have stayed in bed today. But of course, he just lay there, speechless. Because sometimes, silence is the only thing keeping you from losing your mind entirely. As Jogul lay on the ground, still trying to make sense of what had just happened, Myung looked down at him with that same smug grin. So, Sahyung, feeling a little more enlightened? Jogul, in response, could only groan. Enlightened? He felt more like he'd just had his soul slapped out of him and handed back on a plate. Meanwhile, the rest of the disciples were watching in stunned silence. This wasn't just a sparring match. It was a massacre, only with fewer injuries and more bruised egos. Yoonjong, one of the only disciples still keeping a close eye on the entire scene, couldn't help but marvel at Myung's movements. It's like he's dodging Jogul's attacks before they're even made. There was no grand technique, no mystical footwork. Just a subtle step here, a tilt of the head there, and each of Jogul's strikes seemed to miss by mere inches, as if fate itself was conspiring against him. Just how far ahead is he able to read Jogul's movements? Yoonjong wondered, awestruck. On the outside, it looked like Jogul was giving his all, charging, slashing, using every technique he had. But to someone like Yoonjong, it was clear that this fight was over long before it started. Meanwhile, Jogul's frustration was reaching new heights. No matter how hard he swung, how fast he moved, he couldn't land a single hit. His strikes, which had been executed flawlessly, were being dodged with all the ease of someone stepping out of the way of a light breeze. I've trained for months, suffered through hellish drills, and this is all I can do? He thought, his teeth gritted so hard they might break. With desperation flooding his veins, Jogul suddenly poured all of his remaining strength into his next move. His sword glowed with the faint shimmer of sword chi, something he'd only recently begun to manifest. For any disciple, that was a monumental achievement. But right now, it felt like the only lifeline he had left. Sword chi? Someone from the watching group gasped. Can he actually use sword chi? Another whispered, clearly impressed. But Jogul wasn't paying attention to any of that. All he could focus on was Myung, standing there with that cocky smirk, looking like he had already won. This is it! This is my moment! Jogul thought as he lunged forward, his sword aimed directly at Myung. But just as quickly as Jogul's confidence surged, it was shattered. Myung stepped forward with one smooth, precise movement. His sword was already raised high above Jogul's head. Time slowed to a crawl as Jogul saw it coming. The inevitability of defeat. The realization that no matter how hard he tried, this fight was always going to end this way. This is it. I'm done. And then, with a deafening swish, Chung Myung's sword came down, stopping just above Jogul's forehead. Thud. Jogul hit the ground, sprawled out like a man who'd just been hit by the full weight of reality. He lay there, staring up at the night sky, wondering why he had ever agreed to this madness in the first place. Chung Myung, as casual as ever, looked down at Jogul with a satisfied grin. See, that's what it feels like to die, Sahyung. You learn anything? Jogul blinked slowly, his pride lying in tatters around him. It feels like I should have skipped today's training, he muttered, the words barely escaping his lips. Chung Myung laughed heartily, clearly enjoying himself. Good, that's the spirit. Net up, you've got more work to do. Jogul, still lying on the ground, had half a mind to just stay there. Maybe if he pretended to be unconscious, Chung Myung would leave him alone. Unfortunately, fate, or rather, Chung Myung, had other plans. Come on, up you go. That was just the warm-up, Chung Myung said, nudging Jogul's side with his foot. Warm-up? Jogul thought. What kind of sadistic warm-up was that? He groaned as he slowly pulled himself to his feet. Every muscle in his body screamed in protest, but there was no way out of this. Not with Chung Myung in charge. The other disciples watched in horror, realizing that sooner or later it would be their turn. No one was safe. As Jogul stood up, wobbling like a newborn deer, Chung Myung smiled brightly and said, Well, shall we go for round 2? Jogul's expression turned ashen. Round 2? He barely survived the first one, but Chung Myung wasn't going to let him back down. Don't worry, he said with a grin that suggested otherwise. This time, you might actually hit me. Jogul didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or just keel over right there. But one thing was for sure, he was going to need a stiff drink after this. Episode 70. Don't worry, I'll make you win. 5. Sweat poured down Jogul's face like he'd just finished running from his ex during a Black Friday sale. Phew. Relief flooded his body as he realized he wasn't dead. In fact, his body was drenched in sweat as if to remind him that, yes, life was still happening, and no, he wasn't just a puddle of regret. It was so bad he could barely open his eyes. Not because he didn't want to see his killer, but because he was literally soaked to the bone. His body shook, trembled, like that one time he tried to lie about his browser history. What if that sword had cut just an inch deeper? Hell, forget an inch. Jogul knew that if the sword had come down even a hair later, he'd be a talking head by now. Well, that is, if heads could talk once they were rolling on the floor. His mind wanted to curse a storm, but the pure shock turned his mouth into a glitchy loading screen. His body trembled as if his limbs had a personal vendetta against him, and no amount of pep talk was soothing that internal fear. Chung Myung smiled at him. Of course, like the psychopath he was. How was it? What? Jogul blinked, barely registering the question. I asked, how was it? What the hell do you mean, how was it, you son of a... Jogul mentally screamed. He had neither the mind nor body to respond right now, though. He could barely think straight, let alone process whatever madness was spewing from Chung Myung's mouth. Do you feel like you've died? That? Jogul squeezed out the last bits of his strength. I feel like I lost. You crazy bastard. But Chung Myung? Nah, he didn't care. Heh. He just stood there, grinning like the kind of guy who'd watch you step on a Lego and offer you another one to step on for free. Chung Myung turned his back and looked at the rest of the disciples, who were watching this horror show unfold with wide eyes, all internally praying they wouldn't be next. Flinch. The moment they made eye contact with the devil incarnate, their gazes dropped faster than their standards on a Friday night. Sahyungs. Think very carefully. No, don't look at me, the other disciples thought in unison. Can you really avoid this? That wasn't a question. That was a damn challenge. This guy, he's a literal demon. Who let this madman into Mount Hua? Aren't Taoists supposed to be all about inner peace and Zen or something? But one look at Chung Myung and they were convinced. This man was born to break people, not build them. They began to exchange frantic looks, each hoping someone else would step up first. Come on, don't waste time. If you want to get strong, you need to step forward. Great Sahyung? Yoonjong felt his heart seize in terror. He met Chung Myung's gaze for about half a second before turning away faster than a guy dodging child support payments. Jong-hak, how about you go next? Sahyung, I think he called for you. So, you're not going out? Jonghak? No, he just straight up bowed his head in surrender. I can't believe this. He's ruined all of us. The chaos in Yoonjong's head made him want to weep. He'd been holding it together as a Sahyung. But ever since this freak of nature showed up, everything changed. Not just for him, but for everyone. Aren't you going to come? The eerie calm in Chung Myung's voice would have made even seasoned warriors shit bricks. The disciples pushed each other, trying to avoid this death sentence, but Chung Myung just sighed like a disappointed parent finding their kid trying to flush their homework down the toilet. Such a shame. Sahyungs, who should be helping each other, are fighting with one another. Who do you think caused this, you psycho? Did you sell your conscience on eBay or something? But no one dared say anything. Their thoughts were full of curses, but their mouths stayed glued shut. Chung Myung's expression darkened. There's only one way to unite you all. The disciples paled. This couldn't be good. Brotherhood blooms when you share in each other's suffering. Only by overcoming tribulations together will love unite you. That definitely didn't sound good. Don't worry, I'll be sure to treat you all fairly. What? Chung Myung raised his sword. No, no, don't you dare, the disciples screamed internally. But Chung Myung came at them anyway, sword blazing like a madman with a death wish. Or maybe he just wished death on everyone else. The disciples tried to scatter, but it was like trying to run from a wolf when you're all dressed as sheep. You, get over here. Who the hell is coming to you, you lunatic? Yoonjong, in a burst of regret and bad decision-making, closed his eyes as Chung Myung's sword came crashing down. And then, in that brief moment of peace before all hell broke loose, everyone collectively had the same thoughts. No. Mother. Father, I swear I'll stop wasting money on useless gotcha games. I left some beef jerky under my bed. Are you serious right now? And then there was Chung Myung, sking at them, shaking his head like a disappointed kindergarten teacher. All right, you all did well. Normally, anyone would have gotten up and cursed him out. But not today. No one had the strength. They'd just been through the gates of hell and back, and no one was eager for a second round. Yoonjong wiped the sweat from his brow with shaking hands. His thoughts were a mess. That fucking bastard. And so the torture continued with Chung Myung relentlessly pushing them, because clearly this guy had his own twisted version of tough love. Chung Myung, ever the demanding teacher, looked at everyone and smiled. How was that? What? Fortunately for everyone's dignity, Joe Gould had recovered enough to at least speak, though he wasn't exactly happy about it. Why didn't you stop my attack? Huh? It was an obvious strike. So why didn't you try to stop it? After all this, he was really asking that. Was this guy serious? Joe Gould, clearly at the end of his patience, exclaimed, nearly on the verge of yelling. It was fast. So fast that I didn't even have time to think about stopping it. Even a child would get that. Chung Myung, as usual, didn't seem to care about Joe Gould's emotional outburst. Is that so? He smiled in that way that made everyone uncomfortable. Good, you understand well. You. Joe Gould gritted his teeth. Then, why didn't the others stop it? Huh? Joe Gould stared at him with a blank expression, about to launch into some big speech about how they weren't superhumans like him, when whoosh! Chung Myung slashed his sword again, the blade whistling through the air like it was nothing. Whoosh! Dust flew up, and the sound of the sword cutting through the air echoed all around. See? Simple. The others, who had just gotten their bearings, turned to see Chung Myung standing there, his sword raised as if this was just another typical training session. Which, for him, it probably was. Was that the same strike you used on us? Joe Gould finally asked, his mind still spinning from the craziness of it all. Yes. But it looked way faster before. Chung Myung shrugged, casually spinning the sword like he wasn't about to make them question everything about their training. It's the same. A sword aimed at your head always seems faster than one you watch from a distance. Joe Gould blinked. Slowly, the gears started turning in his head. So, you're saying I can do that too? With practice, Chung Myung answered as he raised his sword again. Watch! Whoosh! Another slash, smooth and effortless, like he wasn't demonstrating one of the deadliest techniques around. Joe Gould watched, trying to absorb every detail of the movement. It was so simple that it almost made him feel silly for struggling so much before. This is a drop slash, Chung Myung said, as if it were the most basic thing in the world. Jogul tried to respond, but words failed him. You've built your body well. Now you just need to use it. Focus on your lower body first, Chungmyung instructed, stomping his foot down to emphasize. Jogul swore the ground looked like it might crack under the force. Keep your footing steady, transfer your strength from your waist to your fingers, and unite it with your internal energy. Then strike. Whoosh! Another slash, and this time Jogul watched closely, determined not to miss a thing. Chungmyung smiled, that mischievous glint in his eye that made everyone brace themselves for what was next. Easy, right? Jogul, still trying to process everything, could only nod weakly. Yoonjong, however, was brave enough to speak up. I understand what you're saying, but we are disciples of Mount Hua. Is it really meaningful to win using such a method? So what if we're disciples of Mount Hua? Chungmyung responded, already looking like he wanted to smack Yoonjong on the head. If we're disciples of Mount Hua, shouldn't we defeat our opponents with Mount Hua's sword arts? Chungmyung stared at Yoonjong as if he had just asked the world's most obvious question. What did I just do? A down slash? What's the first form of the 6 equilibrium sword? A downward slash. Right, and isn't the 6 equilibrium sword one of Mount Hua's techniques? Yoonjong coughed awkwardly, clearly embarrassed. I didn't think it through. Tsk, tsk, tsk. Chungmyung shook his head in mock disappointment. You're all trying to skip ahead, chasing after flashy techniques without mastering the basics. All of Mount Hua's sword arts are built on the 6-fold technique. A building with a weak foundation collapses in the first storm. Everyone nodded, though mostly to avoid further torment from Chungmyung. Jogul stood up, rubbing his sore muscles. Chungmyung? Yes? I have just one question. Go ahead. Jogul cleared his throat, trying to choose his words carefully. I understand that the 6 equilibrium sword is important, but we aren't you. We don't have that kind of time. We need to beat those Southern Edge guys now, not someday. Chungmyung sighed. Jogul bit his lip, half expecting a verbal smackdown. What did you even take away from what I said? Chungmyung asked, raising an eyebrow. Huh? You think you'd lose to the Southern Edge sect? Then you might as well give up already. A disciple of Mount Hua losing to those Southern Edge folks? I'd be ashamed of you. Jogul physically recoiled from the intensity in Chungmyung's gaze. What's his deal with those guys? Jogul wondered. He only joined us recently. Chungmyung continued his lecture, voice rising with conviction. Didn't I already tell you? I'll make sure all of you win. He raised his sword, pointing it at the group like a general rallying his troops. There's no such thing as losing gracefully. Winning is what matters. You use any strategy, take advantage of every opportunity, and if you anyone will remember. Got it? Jogul blinked, his confidence rising despite the wildness of the speech. Somehow, this guy always made them feel like they could achieve the impossible. So what's next? Jogul asked, feeling more hopeful than before. How do we use a sword like you? It's simple. Chungmyung grinned. We'll start by swinging the sword 10,000 times. You're joking, right? Of course I'm joking. Jogul let out a sigh of relief. Maybe this time it wouldn't be so bad. I'm not joking. Chungmyung's grin widened, like a man who had just come up with the perfect plan. Do you want to lose later, or would you rather be ready now? Jogul froze, realizing that there was no easy way out of this. Forget the Southern Edge sect. The real challenge is right here in Mount Hua.